In a year of many good games, Hades 2 is the most highly rated of them all. It's also the sequel to my favourite action roguelike, so unsurprisingly I went into it with high expectations, and it almost didn't disappoint me. This game has phenomenal presentation, the gameplay is addictively enjoyable and impressively deep, and there is enough content here to provide hundreds of hours of playtime. And I do want to stress that last point, because this doesn't just feel like a large game, it feels like a large game plus a large expansion rolled into one, and all of it maintains sky-high production values. This feels like a AAA game if a AAA-sized studio wanted to make a game of this genre and was actually competent. Which is a feat that is incredibly impressive, and I do not know how a studio of just 25 employees did this. I also don't know why they did this, and I don't mean superficially. I can go read an interview that cites reasons like making what the team was most excited for, or wanting to explore more Greek mythology just like anyone else can. But what I don't understand is how a studio of such abundant talent could make a game that is so good in so many ways, yet drops the ball so hard in one way in particular, and how that studio could be Supergiant Games. In a previous video years ago where I reviewed all 4 of Supergiant's earlier titles, I said that I didn't know any developer that was better at integrating gameplay elements into the narrative to create something greater than the sum of their parts. I also said that Supergiant might be the best indie developer in the industry simply because their games are so consistently exciting, innovative, and original. After playing Hades 2, I'm not sure either of those statements are true anymore, and it's not because Supergiant is no longer a contender for best ever indie developer. That part might still be true. This game is incredibly impressive, and I don't know how a team of 25 people made this. But Hades 2 is not an exciting sequel. It's not innovative, it's not original, and it doesn't integrate its gameplay elements into its narrative to create something greater than the sum of its parts. In fact, its gameplay is often hurt by its story, and its story is limited by its gameplay. In short, it is no Hades 1. Except, it basically is Hades 1, and it is precisely because it is Hades 1 that it is not Hades 1, because Hades 1 was not Hades 1, it was just Hades. Looking at that last sentence makes me question whether I should rewrite it to be more easily understandable, but I will not do that because I meant exactly what I said. I will, however, elaborate, but not before giving Hades 2 a bit more of its due. And what fitting way is there to praise Hades 2 than praising Hades 1? Even if you ignored Hades' presentation and story, you would still find one of the most rock-solid action roguelikes ever made. Combat felt fluid and stayed relatively readable, even with lots of action on screen. Different weapons, weapon aspects, boons, and boss variants gave a ton of gameplay variety, and there was a high concentration of strategic decisions each run in its choice of rooms, boons, and scaling customizable difficulty settings. What I most enjoyed about the gameplay, however, was that whenever I died in this game, I felt like it was a result of my mistake. Not bad RNG, not unfair attacks, and not so much visual chaos that dodging everything felt no longer humanly possible. I always knew what killed me and why, and was left feeling like I could do better. And then I did. This is not a quality I've found all action roguelikes to possess, and while some have criticized Hades for its lack of crazy builds that create that fun yet broken roguelike imbalance, I personally would rather skill be the ultimate deciding factor in an action game and save the nan-inf brokenness for a less action-focused title. All the qualities Hades 1 excelled at are still present in Hades 2, and have arguably been expanded. Combat is just as fluid, yet even more readable thanks to the dash spam of the first game being scaled back to make the action feel more calculated and deliberate. There's also more variety in almost every way, like more gods, more enemies, more room types, and 2 entirely distinct paths. Even your core moveset is basically doubled, thanks to the added ability to hold an attack button to do a stronger magic-based attack, taking your core moves for each weapon from 2 to 4, and adding even more strategic depth to character building thanks to the new mana resource. And all this added depth, while maybe harder to get into for new players, no one likes reading tooltips, ups the overall complexity, leading to even more rewarding decision making down the line. Hades 2 even does a better job catering to the roguelike sickos that just want the game to buckle under the weight of that one godlike run, because all the new options ensure builds can break harder this time round. There are things you could criticize. Hexes seem highly unbalanced. Upgrades and resource gathering is so extensive it can get annoyingly in the way, while also feeling like too large a factor in the early game success, and the need to upgrade every weapon and arcana in the mid-game ultimately disincentivizes experimentation at a time when players might want to experiment the most, i.e. when farming repeat last boss kills to reach the final ending. There may also be other problems that would reveal themselves to me as I dig deeper into alternate weapon aspects and climb higher in fear level, but as it stands, the gameplay here seems close to being that 10 out of 10 action roguelike experience that succeeds at being like Hades 1 but better. And you could say exactly the same about the presentation, because it too feels like it retains all the positives while basically just doubling everything. More songs, more voice acting, more environments, and character art that is twice the size, in addition to there being twice the number of characters. And the story also tries to follow this keep the good parts but double everything approach. It just doesn't work. One of the most unique and widely praised parts of Hades 1 was that every gameplay element the genre demands had narrative justification. For example, the main character and son of Hades, Zagreus, was trying to leave the underworld, with each run being an escape attempt and every death taking you back to the House of Hades because you're tied to this realm. Meanwhile, in Hades 2, you're a new child of Hades, Melinoë, who is on a quest to kill Kronos, Hades' father, who has now taken over the underworld and imprisoned most of the last game's cast. When you're defeated, the new justification for why you come straight back to life is that you use magic to teleport away at the last second. When you're successful, Kronos instead uses time magic to come straight back to life to explain why he's still the last boss on the next run. The reason you have to kill Kronos multiple times for the true ending is to farm items used to cast a powerful spell. The reason the gods of Olympus can't do anything to help other than offer boons is because they can't resist Kronos' magic. Basically, everything still has an explanation, but the explanations aren't good, and almost all of them just boil down to magic. As magic isn't real, it can function however the writers need it to. And in this case, the writers need it to justify the player doing the exact same thing as the last game for a completely different reason, and so magic provides these justifications. But this doesn't make this good writing, and the same parts of Hades 1 that once felt refreshingly cohesive now just come off as contrived. Yet Hades 1 wasn't only remarkable for its cohesiveness, it also surprised with its reactivity. In Hades, characters comment on almost everything that happens. Bosses you fight gloat over their previous victory or sulk about their previous defeat. Special attacks lead to special voice lines in response, and as the story evolves, different characters chime in on different parts of it, all in real time in step with the player's progress. And again, all this still happens in Hades 2. In fact, there's probably even more reactivity, but the difference is that when Hades 1 reacted to things that games don't usually acknowledge, it was surprising. Yet when Hades 2 does it, it's now expected. This doesn't make the reactivity bad, and Hades 2 still has its moments, like Kronos, the master of time, chiming in to complain when you pause the game during his boss fight. But overall, this is all not quite as impressive the second time round. Still, the true misstep lies with the main story. Hades 2 is about saving the world. The underworld, that is, which Kronos has royally fucked. But wait, no, also the rest of the world, which is getting fucked just as hard from a rampaging father of all monsters. Don't worry about who that is, he doesn't really speak. Basically, everything's in ruins, everyone needs saving, and only you, Malinois, can do the job. Pretty standard stuff for a video game, right? But this wasn't what Hades was about. In the first game, no one was in danger, no one needed saving, the world was continuing as normal, and the capricious gods of Olympus were only lightly intervening because they were curious and/or bored. Instead, Hades was a simple family drama, mostly focused on father and son. The son wanted to escape the underworld, the father wouldn't allow him, and it's revealed that both characters have good reasons, with this conflict gradually being resolved over the course of the game through each gaining a greater understanding of the situation and each other. The deliberately lower stakes this provided helped the story stand out compared to other games, but the central focus on family drama also meant the regular conversations with other characters served a purpose. It was through these conversations that we explored this family in more detail, finding out backstory and relationships that provided nuance and depth and intrigue. Through this, the House of Hades itself became a compelling part of the narrative, cleverly incorporating different parts of Greek mythology into a cohesive and very human depiction of something usually only rendered as a dramatic place of death and darkness. And because the stakes were low, the writers also had license to be light-hearted. Characters joked around and bantered and sometimes just relaxed or hung out, which made sense, because it's not like the world was ending or anything. But now the world is ending all over the place, and things which once worked, work no longer. Conversations are not fleshing out the central family drama the story revolves around, but are instead usually just reiterating that you need to kill Kronos and how that's currently going. This gets repetitive, and to make things worse, instead of having a charismatic lead who has interesting dynamics with the various people you speak to, we now have Malinois. Malinois was brought up in a post-Kronos world, and her entire life has revolved around the need to one day stop Kronos. So that is basically her entire personality. And that's not just me being flippant. The Hades fandom wiki describes her personality as serious, disciplined, uninterested in the affairs of mortals, and having a one-track mind. And fair enough, given the high-stakes story, but this personality does not lead to interesting dialogue. So in addition to these conversations often lacking purpose, they also lack any form of chemistry, wit, or charisma. And so the hours and hours of character dialogue can go from a blessing to a curse. The game is asking players to invest so much time into its story and characters, yet it's giving almost nothing in return, which makes this very different from just a game that has a weak story. Games don't need stories. I've played over 1,000 hours of Slay the Spire, and I'm honestly not sure what the story even is. I mean, I guess we're slaying a spire. Except 1,000 hours in, and I don't actually remember doing that, so I guess slaying the spire might be more metaphorical, and the story is actually about... there's this whale who I think is good because he says hi and gives me stuff, and a heart that is bad, who I guess could be a spire. I mean, I have slayed it. Sometimes, usually I just ignore it on High Ascension, but you know, that part might not be canon. What is the story for this game? I'm not even joking. On realizing I didn't know, I checked the Wikipedia page just to satisfy my curiosity, only to find it doesn't even mention story. The word story is literally absent from this entire page. ChatGPT did even worse. What do you mean the story is told through card descriptions? This game doesn't have card descriptions. Fucking AI. You're not taking my job. Because I don't have one. Games don't need stories. But a bad story is worse than no story because it interrupts the gameplay and disappoints players and just wastes time. And conversations in Hades 2 did sometimes feel like they were wasting my time. Yet so much of this could still be turned around by a good ending. Hades 2 almost feels like it sacrifices so much of what was good about the last game's narrative in service of its new focus on a high-stakes story. This isn't a game about banter, or chill vibes, or humanizing usually inhuman parts of Greek mythology, or exploring family relations. This is a game about killing Kronos. That is Melinoe's entire personality. That is the subject of almost every conversation. That is the game's very first words.
Death to Kronos.
Hell, before you even start playing, that is the name of the main theme that plays when you boot the game up. Death to Kronos. Every change this game makes and every action you do is all about this one thing. So, how does the game handle this one thing? Spoiler warning, I wish I could make a timestamp for the spoilers, but I'm not sure YouTube will let me have video chapters on this channel yet, because clearly video chapters are just too powerful a tool for a new channel to wield, but I'll put a timestamp in the description for people to click. Anyway, spoilers. It would be a very boring ending to this game if after hours of gameplay you simply enact the big plan and kill Kronos and everyone lives happily ever after. It would be very boring. But still probably better than what we actually got. Instead, Kronos is saved after Zagreus goes against the plan by making friends with him instead of delivering the killing blow. Through this, Kronos looks up an alternative timeline where he instead loves his grandchildren, and so he gives up his evil ways and becomes a kindly old grandpa that no longer cares about power or revenge, making everything resolved, except for some loose timelines where Kronos is still evil for Melinoe to continue traveling to, so the roguelike gameplay has some narrative justification to keep existing. There are a lot of reasons why this could be disappointing. The redemption feels unearned and too sudden. Resolving everything through the power of friendship feels cheap. Melinoe has no actual agency in this, making the barely seen in this game Zagreus the real star of the show. The light-hearted, jokey tone here conflicts with the rest of the story's more serious nature. The inconsistent use of time travel feels contrived. The narrative justification for why the gameplay continues feels even more contrived. And it's also really, really long. There's like almost an hour of pure yapping just in this ending cutscene, which is a lot of time to force players to listen to something they may actually hate. In conclusion, it's a bad conclusion to a story that puts all its emphasis on the destination, only for that destination to be a repeat of the first game's ending and message in a story where they no longer actually fit. And so, Hades 2 is another example of a sequel fumbling its story because it is a story that was never meant to exist. That is what really went wrong here. This doesn't feel like it's the writer's fault. Often the writing is doing its best to try to make things make sense, to try to continue Hades' story in a way that's exciting and fresh, to try to conclude a roguelike narrative without actually concluding it, and to try to repeat all the things people liked about the last game. The problem is not really with the writing, it's with the very idea to make a sequel to a game that was never meant to have one. Which reportedly was a team decision, so I guess if you do want someone to blame, the answer is everyone. But this is by no means a new or unique problem. It is an old and familiar one in a world where good things get sequels because sequels make money, and no popular franchise must ever be allowed a dignified death. Instead, they are forced to continually return for a new run with slight changes, like a character in a roguelike. It is a classic tale known to all, but I never thought Supergiant Games would fall victim to it. I can't believe this game takes so few risks, has so little interest in playing with audience expectations or doing anything creative with the genre, and is so formulaic for a studio famous for the exact opposite. In the end, the most surprising thing about this game is how few surprises it actually has, which personally I found just as disappointing as the ending. Great gameplay though. God, this game is fun. It just hits that spot and there's so much content. How can you be mad at a game this good? But how can you not be mad at a game this good that could be better? It's a tough question, but I guess the answer can be found by playing another round of Slay the Spire. I think I'm going to pay attention to the story this time. Make it a lore run. Let's see. Greetings. Okay, we can talk. Talking's good. Choose. Well, I guess upgrading a card is safe. Let's do that. Granted. Knew he's a good guy. Always helpful, this guy. And that's the end of the story. It's one of my favorites, actually. I really like the bit with the whale. Thank you for watching. I'm going to be streaming Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 all next week, Monday to Thursday, so watch on Twitch, or maybe here on this channel because I need an easy way to make VODs, so I think I'll have to start multi-streaming. But Bloodlines 2 should be the next real video, unlike this video, which is not real. You're currently dreaming. Wake up.